USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
I was born in Berkeley, California in 1949, and Berkeley, California, of course, was the center of the free speech movement, so there was a lot to experience. We were concerned because males back then were subject to the draft. So I decided that if I was going to go to the war anyway, might as well go with the best and see action. So that's what guided me towards joining the Marine Corps. And I always thought that if I went, then my brother wouldn't have to go. Yeah, it was intense. You suddenly discovered religion because Sunday morning was the one time where the drill instructor could not lay hands on any recruits. Laying hands on a recruit may seem cruel, but what they were trying to elicit from you was I call it the warrior gene. Well, combat is just not something that a civilized person can handle. So emotions need to be repressed, and that's where it starts in boot camp. You got your MOS the day you graduated, and my MOS was 2531. That was a field radio operator. When I watch all of the SEAL Team 6 television shows and the micro communication gear that they had, I was jealous. We had the PRC 25, we just call it the Prick 25, and it was the size of a pack that the Marines normally carry. When I first got over to Vietnam and was assigned to 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, I found that there were no field radio operators out with the infantry companies. So one day, I got my wish. I was called in and said, yep, you're going to go to Echo Company. And I said, whoa, okay, cool. And they assigned a field radio operator to each of the 4 companies, and all of a sudden it ran even smoother. The majority of the time I spent south of Da Nang, and it was rice paddies, sand dunes, and a lot of booby traps. When you were a radio person at the company level, you had to actually know what the CO and the platoon commanders were doing. On a daily routine, when the skipper would go ahead and call the platoon commanders in, and they would plot out the ambushes and all of that, then we had our maps and made sure that we had all the plots as well, because the patrols, when they would go out, there were checkpoints, and they would call in checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2, and you would note on the map just where everyone was at. So when it hit the fan and you needed to get a medevac out immediately, or air support or artillery or 81s or even our 60 mortars, you had the coordinates, and the skipper didn't have to get on the horn. We handled that sort of thing and got everything rolling. I saw that picture and I said, man, we sure were just young pups. The big one that I always allude to is the one on December 21st, 1968. And that morning, the choppers were on the late side, and the area we were going to go into, the reason for the trip was that there were rice caches out there that we needed to secure and destroy. We went in waves. So the first wave went in, and then the choppers came back and picked us up. They flew us in, and then of course the door gunners started to yell that it was a hot LZ. So when the thing went in, it landed so hard that for a second there I got wedged in between the bench seat and the fuselage of the chopper. I couldn't get out. Once everything settled down, I got the wounded out, then the reports started coming in that they were finding 105 booby traps and Lieutenant Moore, he'd only been in country a few months, and he was learning the trade. He was really getting good. And he ended up detonating one just feet from us. So it knocked us all down, and body parts were hitting us. And Lieutenant Young, who was the CO, wanted Doc Wilkinson to do something, and there wasn't much left to do, because there wasn't much left of Lieutenant Moore. It was a 3-day operation. There were just booby traps out the wazoo. There were box mines that we found. We did find the rice, of course, but it was the 23rd, I believe, when they called it off. That was it, and they didn't even send the choppers back to give us a ride back. We had to hump it back to Battalion, and that's how we spent our Christmas. And Mike Gardine and I had gotten back to Battalion. We'd gotten our 2-minute shower, got clean utilities on, and went to the barber shop on base. And the Vietnamese were led on the base during the daytime, and the barber was Vietnamese. So we go in there and get our hair cut, and then he wants to take a picture, which is the picture of me and Mike that I sent you. And he says, "When do you go home?" And I can't remember how many months I had left. And then he says, "I go home 5 o'clock." So that was the funniest joke I had ever heard. You had your choice of 2 duties while you were back at Battalion. One was the road sweep, which happened every morning, or you could burn, we just call them burn the shitters. So the road sweep, I got that, and on one occasion, the Jeep hit a box mine. I mean, it was a big one. It was so big the Jeep was down in a crater, and the Marines that were in it, they were just half of their bodies were just sitting in there. So that was one of the first, but the very first was when Battalion had been. They tried to breach the wire, and they got inside too, because one of the dead NVA or VC, they just hauled out, and he was kind of on display. And there were a few things that cross your mind when you go into combat. You were wondering, first of all, how you were going to react under fire, and then the other was how you're going to react when you see your first dead body. So this guy was dead, and I had gone to the chow hall and had something, a sandwich of some sort, and I just went over there and decided to test out my stomach, and that was okay. And then it was after that was the road sweep with the mine incident, and then it just kind of piled on from there with Lieutenant Moore. And then in it was like 17 days or so after our Christmas vacation, we had an incident at Camp Saw 1 where there was nothing but carnage. Well, January 15th of '69 was a bad day for Echo. We lost some Marines. Corporal Bradley, we just call him Brad. He got a Silver Star out of the deal, posthumously, of course. But that was a day-long gun battle. You were ducking behind things, rounds were flying, explosions. That's one of the reasons why I say in boot camp they elicit the warrior gene from you so that you're more immune from normal emotions when it comes to carnage and death, and it makes you a better warrior, but it affects you later on when you get home, and it's hard to turn it off. Whenever you lost somebody, whenever someone was wounded and you had to medevac them out, part of that gene that kicks in is that once they're gone, you remember what they look like, you remember their faces, but soon after that, everything starts to fade to the point where you don't even remember their name, and they're just gone, because everything continued after that. I mean, if you lost somebody, the war didn't stop, the ambushes didn't stop, the patrols didn't stop. Everything continued. It was 7 days a week. When I went on R&R the first time in July, July 10th, I think, in '69 to Singapore, and that was like going to heaven. But after the first day, you're on a countdown, and you're constantly thinking, okay, I got 4 days left, I got 3 days left, got 2 days left, and then you have to go back to the airport, get on that plane voluntarily and fly back, pick up your gear, and go back in the field, which that's a dangerous time for anybody. During this period, we were on a big operation, and you knew that as soon as you landed back in Da Nang and got your gear and back in the battalion, that you had to get your mind set back to where it was before, or daydreams can get someone or yourself killed.
When did you leave Vietnam for the last time?
It was at the end of the month of May of 1970. And as soon as the billet became open at Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C., and I was accepted, because you just couldn't go there. First you had to be a combat vet, and then they had to look at your service record before they accepted you, and then I went and served out the rest of my tour at Marine Barracks at 8th and I. Friday night parades under the lights, Tuesday night parades at the Iwo Jima Memorial. I was accepted in the silent drill team, so we got to go with the drum and bugle corps all over the place and put on the drill. That was a good way to end my service with the Marine Corps, active duty. I don't know how many decades, but I had to sleep with earplugs after I got out of the Marine Corps, because I could hear everything. And the only way to shut off the noise was to wear earplugs. And we didn't wear them in combat, but I wore them when I got home. So your mind was still constantly over there. July 4th, that wasn't a good time, and that made it difficult on the people that were in my life, because for one, for Mary, that was her big celebration day. Mary, she passed away this past January. We were together for 26 years, good years. I did my solo ride back to Washington, D.C. to put some ghosts to rest. I figured that if I made pledges at the wall in front of my brothers, that those were pledges and promises that you wouldn't break. Well, when I first got out of the Marine Corps, I went into security. That was a natural fit, and then went into loss prevention. But then I started getting more involved with motorcycles, motorcycle racing, and then I started making my own protection. chest, back protection, limb protection, that sort of stuff for motorcycle racing. Do other things, do special orders for people who have heart conditions or who have had heart transplants and need protection so that they can drive or continue to ride or race. And I protect kids that race motorcycles because unlike when I was a teenager, kids now, beginning 5 years old, are on a two-wheeled powered cycle and will take to the track soon after that. So they do need protection. So that brings me joy in being able to do that. But at some point I'm going to need to tone that down because there's other things that require my attention. And one of those things concerns what happened at Abbey because that was my old battalion. And 9 of the 13 were 2-1, and the rest were standing shoulder to shoulder with 2-1 at the time they lost their lives. So you just can't forget about that sort of thing, and the public needs to be constantly be made aware of that, because as long as the Gold Star families are going through what they are going through on a daily basis, or the Marines and their families who were severely wounded have gone, or continually and will be for the rest of their lives, it's incumbent upon people like me to ensure that it's not forgotten, and those responsible are at some point are held accountable. The way I always viewed my service is that it's not what you think you did and did well or didn't do. It's what others thought and about your service. It's a responsibility that you shouldn't take lightly, but if you do it right and people remember you because of the things that you did that were right, you could whenever anyone says thank you for your service, you can actually say you're welcome. And that's what I tell or say to anyone who sees me and I'm wearing my Marine Corps cover, and they say thank you for your service, and I just say you're welcome.